Have you ever noticed how some people seem to possess an almost magnetic presence without saying much? They don't defend their choices, they don't rationalize their decisions, they simply withdraw, and suddenly everything shifts. The energy changes. People begin to respect boundaries they didn't even know existed, and questions that once demanded answers dissolve into silence. Now imagine if you did the same. If you stopped justifying every decision, if you chose conviction over explanation, authenticity over approval, what do you think would happen? That's where the transformation lies. When you stop explaining yourself constantly, your choices, your boundaries, your very existence, the world around you enters a state of recalibration. People are accustomed to having access to your reasoning, to understanding your motivations, to feeling entitled to your justifications. But the day you choose to simply be without explanation, the dynamic shifts entirely. Those who thought they understood you realize they were only familiar with your defenses, not your essence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about this. When you become someone who doesn't need to explain, who really gets uncomfortable, who demands reasons, who insists on understanding your every move, this reveals more about their need for control than about your obligation to provide clarity. You keep giving pieces of yourself away through endless explanations, justifying your boundaries, defending your choices, rationalizing your very existence to maintain peace with people who are never truly at peace with themselves. With every forced explanation, every defensive response, every justification you offer, you surrender a fragment of your sovereignty. At the end of the day, what remains? Exhaustion, the hollow feeling of having betrayed your own knowing for the comfort of others' understanding. But here's what I'll tell you. You are over-explaining to those who don't deserve even the gift of your reasoning. This isn't about becoming cold or dismissive. It's about choosing your authentic self. It's about understanding what Friedrich Nietzsche called becoming who you are. The process of aligning with your true nature without seeking permission or providing justification. This transformation begins when you grasp that your truth needs no defense, that your choices require no external validation, that your existence is its own explanation. So I ask you now, looking directly at you, how long will you continue to be controlled by others' need to understand you? How long will you diminish yourself by constantly providing reasons for your authentic choices? Perhaps it's time to stop explaining, to become mystery, to let your actions speak while your words rest. Because when you stop explaining yourself, everything changes. You've been conditioned since childhood to believe that you owe the world an explanation, that your worth is measured by how well you can justify your decisions, defend your boundaries, rationalize your needs. You've been taught that silence is rude, that mystery is selfish, that not explaining yourself is somehow cruel. But here's a truth that perhaps no one has offered you with such clarity. This compulsive need to explain yourself is not virtue. It's imprisonment. And as long as you continue believing you must justify every choice, every boundary, every moment of authenticity, you will be manipulated, diminished, and forgotten the moment your explanations no longer serve others' comfort. Do you know why? Because constant explanation makes you predictable, and everything predictable becomes a tool in someone else's hands. People begin treating you like an emotional vending machine. They insert their curiosity, their judgment, their discomfort, and expect you to dispense the explanations that make them feel better. When you don't perform this function, you're labeled difficult, mysterious, or worse. But you haven't realized this because you're trapped in the illusion that explaining yourself will earn you understanding, acceptance, love. It doesn't work that way. Ralph Waldo Emerson understood this when he wrote, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. The more you place yourself at the mercy of others' need to understand, the more you disappear from your own center." Constant explanation is a subtle form of self-betrayal. It's seeking approval disguised as communication, avoiding conflict masqueraded as kindness, trying to control others' perception of you when the only perception that truly matters is your own. But this control comes at a devastating price. Your peace, your energy, your very sense of self scattered like coins thrown to beggars who will never be satisfied. People who demand constant explanations don't actually want to understand you. They want to control you. They want access to your decision-making process so they can influence it, manipulate it, make you doubt it. When you change, when you set a boundary without explanation, when you simply say no without a dissertation on why, those same people become frustrated. They call you different, difficult, changed. It's not because you've become worse. It's because you've stopped being useful to their need for control. Here's the cruelest truth. The more you explain yourself, the less others respect you. What requires no effort to obtain has no value. What is always available becomes ordinary. So pause now and consider. Who truly deserves insight into your inner world? Who has earned the right to your reasoning? Who deserves your explanations? Or better yet, who deserves to encounter you as you are without justification? Lao Tzu didn't see the human spirit as a mechanism that must constantly prove itself to the world. For him, true power flows from the center of being, not from the periphery of explanation. Every time you over-explain, you leak vital energy. When you defend choices that need no defense, when you justify boundaries that are inherently valid, when you rationalize your authentic self, you're distributing your inner strength to those who offer nothing in return. The ancient Chinese philosopher understood that the sage does not attempt anything very big, and thus achieves greatness. Every time you feel compelled to explain yourself, ask, am I acting from strength or from the need for approval? When you constantly justify yourself, you bind yourself to others' opinions. What you resist persists, and what you explain perpetually requires explanation. People who live emotionally drained by over-explanation aren't weak. They're misdirected. And do you know what happens to someone who lives in constant justification? They become vulnerable to manipulation because everyone knows exactly which buttons to push to extract another explanation, another defense, another piece of their sovereignty. Manipulative people can sense when you haven't learned to guard your inner authority. They notice that you feel compelled to justify everything, that you're constantly trying to make everyone comfortable with your choices, and they exploit this. Epictetus taught that wealth consists in not having great possessions, but in having few wants. The same applies to explanation. Strength consists not in having great justifications, but in needing few. A healthy psyche knows how to contain its truth without leaking it to every curious observer. This means knowing how to exist without explanation, how to be present without being transparent, how to stand in your truth without needing others to validate it. True power isn't in convincing. It's in being so aligned with your authentic self that explanation becomes unnecessary. How many times have you lost sleep rehearsing explanations for choices that needed none? How many times have you spent hours crafting perfect justifications for boundaries that should stand without defense? This is energy hemorrhaging without purpose. You're feeding dynamics that exist only because you keep providing fuel. Your compulsive explanations are keeping alive conversations that should have ended long ago. When you learn to conserve your explanatory energy, you break the projections others place on you. You become impossible to manipulate because you're no longer participating in the game of justification. And this disturbs people tremendously, because now we're entering territory they cannot navigate. The realm of authentic presence that requires no permission and offers no apology. You believe you're being helpful when you explain everything. You think you're being considerate when you justify your choices. But the truth is more complex. Most of your explanations are unconscious attempts to control others' reactions to your authenticity. Voltaire observed, "Judge a man by his questions rather than his answers." When you stop explaining yourself, you reveal who around you has been asking the wrong questions all along. Those who truly respect you don't require constant explanation. They trust your judgment, honor your autonomy, and understand that some things simply are. But there are others. The ones who panic when you don't provide reasoning, who become uncomfortable with your unexplained choices, who demand access to your thought processes as if they have a right to audit your decisions. These people aren't seeking understanding, they're seeking control. Your explanations give them maps to your inner world that they use to manipulate your future choices. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this when he wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free." When you stop explaining yourself, you become alone in a profound way. Alone with your truth, your choices, your authentic self. This solitude is threatening to those who have grown accustomed to having access to your reasoning. Your unexplained presence forces others to confront their own relationship with mystery, with boundaries, with the reality that they are not entitled to understand everything about everyone. The most effective manipulation doesn't happen through force. It happens through the gentle insistence that you owe others an explanation for being yourself. When someone says, "I just don't understand why you," they're not seeking comprehension, they're seeking the right to influence your decision. When they say, "You need to explain yourself," they're establishing their authority over your autonomy. But when you respond with calm presence instead of detailed explanation, the game breaks. When you offer your truth without justification, their manipulation tactics become powerless. Your refusal to explain is a declaration. "I'm not seeking your approval. I'm not requesting your permission. I'm simply being." This is unbearable for those who have learned to control others through the demand for justification. The modern world is drowning in explanation. Everyone wants to be understood, to justify their choices, to make everyone comfortable with their decisions. Social media has turned existence into a constant defense of self, where every choice requires public justification. But there is a power that few understand, and even fewer embody, the power of existing without explanation. Not the silence of shame or fear, but the profound quiet of someone who knows their worth isn't determined by others' understanding. Rumi wrote, "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment." When you stop explaining yourself, you embrace the bewildering truth that your existence is its own justification. Have you noticed how some people become almost frantic when you don't explain your choices? When you simply exist in your decision without providing the reasoning they crave? It's not because they miss your logic. It's because your unexplained presence takes away their sense of control over you. While you explain, you remain in their game. But when you simply are, you change the entire dynamic. True presence is not the absence of words. It's mastery over the compulsion to justify yourself to everyone who asks. It's the conscious choice not to be dragged into defending what needs no defense. But don't be naive about the cost. Your refusal to explain will make you incomprehensible to those who only knew the version of you that constantly justified itself. It will make you seem distant to those who confused your explanations with intimacy, arrogant to those who mistook your justifications for humility. All of this is simply the world's reaction to encountering someone who no longer seeks its approval. Here's the profound truth. The more you mature spiritually and emotionally, the less you feel compelled to explain yourself, because you understand that your authentic choices are their own explanation to those who matter. Sometimes silence isn't withdrawal, it's sovereignty. It's the language of those who have learned that their worth isn't determined by others' comprehension. Your unexplained presence is uncomfortable because it forces others to deal with their own need to control, their own discomfort with mystery, their own relationship with boundaries they cannot cross. You don't need to make others comfortable with your authentic choices. Your authenticity explains itself to those with eyes to see. Understanding this intellectually changes nothing if you continue explaining every decision, justifying every boundary, defending every authentic choice out of habit and fear. True transformation begins when you make the firm decision to exist without constant justification. And this requires what the Stoics called discipline of desire, the discipline to resist the compulsion to make everyone understand you. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." Your freedom begins when you stop explaining what you're doing with your life to people who aren't living it. Conscious refusal to explain isn't about being cruel or dismissive. It's about recognizing that your authentic self needs no defense. Your true choices require no justification, and your sovereignty is not up for discussion. This starts with small acts of non-explanation, making a decision and standing in it without elaboration, setting a boundary without providing a thesis on why it exists, saying no without launching into reasons, choosing differently without defending the choice. But here's the most crucial part. You don't need to justify your refusal to justify yourself. This meta-explanation trap catches many people. They end up explaining why they are not explaining, thus defeating the entire purpose. Your silence is complete. Your presence is its own explanation. Your authentic choices speak for themselves to those who understand the language of sovereignty. Carl Jung understood that every individuation process requires what he called holding the tension, the ability to remain centered in your truth while others demand you abandon it for their comfort. This means becoming comfortable with being misunderstood, with being seen as different, with having others project their discomfort onto your unexplained authenticity. Want to measure your growth? Notice who distances themselves when you stop explaining everything. Notice who becomes uncomfortable when you exist without justification. Notice who tries to provoke you back into the old pattern of constant explanation. These aren't signs you're doing something wrong. They're proof you're reclaiming your sovereignty from those who had grown accustomed to controlling it. Your unexplained presence is the foundation of self-determination. When you stop justifying yourself to the world, you start living for yourself. When you withdraw from the exhausting cycle of explanation, you affirm that your peace is worth more than others' understanding. And when you finally stop explaining yourself, you discover something profound. Those who truly belong in your life never needed the explanations in the first place. When you stop explaining yourself to everyone, something magnificent unfolds. First comes the discomfort, an internal resistance that whispers you're being selfish, unkind, mysterious for the wrong reasons. You wonder if you're losing people who cared about you. But gradually, this discomfort transforms into something else entirely. Clarity. Where there was once the exhausting noise of constant justification, silence enters. Where there was once the anxiety of needing approval, peace settles. Where there was once the desperate need to make everyone understand, a profound self-knowing emerges. This is what Nietzsche called becoming who you are, not the person others need you to be through their understanding of your explanations, but the person you actually are beneath all justification. In this space where explanations once lived, something powerful grows. Presence. Pure, unexplained, unapologetic presence. The people who feel threatened by your unexplained authenticity reveal that they never wanted to know you. They wanted to control the narrative of who you are. Now that you no longer provide that narrative, they don't know what to do with you. And that is liberation. You will lose people, but you will find yourself. You will become misunderstood by some, but finally understood by those who matter. You will seem mysterious to those who confused your explanations with intimacy, but you will become magnetically authentic to those who recognize sovereignty when they encounter it. Khalil Gibran wrote, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding." The pain of not explaining yourself, of being misunderstood, of standing alone in your truth. This is the shell breaking that reveals who you truly are. Don't be deceived. This is rebirth. A new way of being where you no longer exhaust yourself trying to make everyone comfortable with your authentic choices, where you no longer betray your inner knowing for the temporary peace of others' understanding. Now you only engage with what resonates with your truth, with your peace, with your unexplained but undeniable authenticity. If you've read this far, part of you is already prepared for this transformation. Part of you has grown weary of explaining your existence to people who will never truly understand, because they are not meant to understand. They're meant to simply witness your authentic being or not. The deepest truth is this: being understood means nothing if it requires you to abandon your authentic self. True self-respect begins when you choose your truth over others' comfort, your authenticity over their understanding, your unexplained presence over their explained approval. Now I ask you, are you ready to be misunderstood in service of your truth? Are you prepared to be seen as different, difficult, or distant by those who only knew the version of you that constantly explained itself? Are you willing to pay the price of authentic existence? If this resonates with your soul, if it speaks to something you've always known but never named, write in the comments, "I choose my truth." Let's see how many are ready to stop explaining themselves and start being themselves. The journey of unexplained authenticity begins now.